Spirits of Ionia, walk beside me. Awaken, tiger! Awaken, turtle! Awaken, bear! Awaken, phoenix!
Welcome everyone to this Season 16 Udyr top lane guide. In case you don't know who I am, I'm going to quickly introduce myself here. On League I go by Federals, and ever since Season 8 I have hit Challenger every single season. As I'm recording this video I'm at around 1400 LP, but this season is kinda iffy in terms of matchmaking and ranking, so it's not as good as it would be in previous seasons if I was 1.4k LP, but I think it's still pretty solid. This season, Udyr has been the champion that I've played the most, and this is mainly because I enjoy playing Udyr top lane quite a lot. It's not because he's necessarily broken or super strong, I just like to play him. So because of that, he became my most played character. In this video, I'm going to try to give some detailed explanations about his kit, the runes that I take, items that I take, and so on. And I'm going to go over both AD Udyr and AP Udyr. So this guide isn't just for AD Udyr top lane or just for AP Udyr top lane. I wanted to make a guide where I showcase both playstyles. Now with this introduction out of the way, let's get started. Okay, what I'm going to do right now is go over Udyr's abilities and his kit. The first thing you should know about Udyr is that at level 1 he can level up any ability. You can see right here that I can level up my Q, W, E, or R. And this is because Udyr doesn't exactly have a traditional ultimate. He basically has 4 basic spells and then his passive is actually kind of his ultimate. What his passive allows him to do is to enhance one of his basic abilities. He can enhance his Q, W, E, or R, and that's essentially his actual ultimate. Another thing that's worth noting here is that you can level up Udyr's abilities 6 times each. So if I want to, I can put 6 points into my Q or 6 points into my E, let's say. Udyr cannot level up all of his abilities once he reaches the maximum level. So now that I'm level 18, let's say I want to max my Q, W, and E fully. You can see that I have my points in Q, W, and E, but I cannot use my R at all. I simply don't have points for it. Now, because you're playing Udyr in the top lane, you do have that top lane quest, which means you will get to level 20. And because you get to level 20, you can actually level up the R 2 times because you get those 2 extra levels. But still, you will not be able to fully max out that R. You can see that I have 6 points in Q, W, E, and only 2 points in R. The abilities you max on Udyr will determine what playstyle you play on him. So for example, if you want to play AD Udyr, you're going to max Q. If you want to play AP Udyr, you will max R. If you want to be safer in lane, you can put a few points into your W early. That way you will have a larger shield and larger healing. If you want more movement speed in the mid game, you can max your E second. If you want to bully the enemies in the early game, you can put a few points into your R and then max your Q if you're doing AD Udyr. There's a lot of ways to level up the skills on Udyr. He can honestly max every single spell outside of his E first. And honestly, in some cases, what I do is put something like 3 points into my R and then start maxing my E, but that's super Omega specific. Starting off with his passive here, it has 2 effects. The first one is that he can empower any of his basic abilities, and this effect has a cooldown. What you have to do in order to awaken an ability is to recast it. So for example, I'm going to press my R here. You can see this timer ticking down on the spell, and once that timer is fully depleted, it means my R will come off cooldown. But if I were to actually press my ultimate again here while this timer is going down, it will awaken the spell. And when you awaken a spell, it becomes much stronger. So to show you this, I'm going to press my R like this and then I'm going to awaken it, and now you can see the awakened effect where the spell is different. And now you can see the fact that my passive is on cooldown and it needs to be refreshed. The enemy can actually see this bar right here underneath the mana. So because of this, they will know exactly when your passive is up. For example, I'm going to press my R again and you can see the fact that the bar is red. And now that the bar is red, it means I can awaken the spell. Now that it's back to yellow, it means I cannot awaken the spell. The second part of the passive is much simpler. After you use an ability, you gain attack speed for the next 2 auto attacks and you refund 5% of the awaken cooldown. So in this situation, I once again have my awaken passive on cooldown. I'm going to use my R and attack twice, and you can see that it refunded part of the cooldown. It's also worth noting that if you purchase an item that has an effect that happens when you use your ultimate, it will trigger when you proc your awakened passive. So let's take the item Experimental Hexblade here. It gives you 30 ultimate haste, and whenever you use your ultimate, you get some attack speed and movement speed. The actual ultimate ability haste that is given isn't wasted because it will reduce your awaken cooldown. So right now the cooldown is 50 seconds, but because I have Experimental Hexblade, after I use it, it won't be 50 seconds, it's gonna be less. And when I actually awaken a spell, I will activate that Experimental Hexblade. So I use my R normally here, and then I awaken it, and you can see that the passive cooldown is at 38 seconds, and you can also see the fact that I have the overdrive proc. So buying an item like Hexblade is not out of the question for Udyr. Now let's move on to Udyr's Q. When you activate Udyr Q, you will gain some attack speed for a few seconds, and you will deal additional on-hit damage for a few seconds. And then the next 2 attacks you deal in this stance will deal some extra damage, and that extra damage is percent health damage. So right now, if I just activate my Q, you can see that I get some bonus attack speed here. Now it's gone, but I still can do the 2 attacks, and once I do the 2 attacks, I deal that bonus damage. You can see here that now that the 2 attacks have been used, I don't deal any more bonus damage. If I want to do bonus damage again, I just reactivate my Q and slash away. Now, when you awaken the Q, you will deal even more damage and gain even more attack speed, but you also gain a new effect. Your next 2 attacks will also have a lightning effect on them that can chain to nearby enemies. So right here, you can see the fact that I put a bunch of target dummies down. If I press my Q and then awaken it, and then I attack this target dummy, you can see that chain lightning effect bouncing to the targets, and that bounce deals extra damage. However, if you are using your awakened Q on an enemy and the enemy is alone, that lightning will only strike down that one target. So if I were to awaken my Q right now and attack it, you can see the fact that the lightning just goes on this one target. So for example, if they're in a minion wave, you want to clear the minion wave first, ideally so that the lightning doesn't bounce. That way you can do much more damage and burst down the opponent much easier. If you awaken your Q and then swap to a different stance before you get the 2 lightning attacks in, it won't matter and you will still be able to proc the 2 attacks with the lightning effect. So if I were to awaken my Q right now and then swap to my R, I can still do the 2 attacks and you can see that the lightning still bounces. This isn't something that will happen very often, but it's good to know. Now moving on to Udyr's W, and it's a pretty simple ability. When you activate this spell, Udyr will gain a shield and his next 2 attacks will heal him. Additionally, Udyr will have increased lifesteal while he has the W on and his 2 attacks aren't used. So right now you can see the fact that I have 0% lifesteal. But now that I activate my W, you can see the fact that I have 15% lifesteal. Despite the fact that my W shield is down now, I still have my 2 attacks here. If I were to take damage, I can now attack this target dummy and heal up. And you can see the fact that I still have the lifesteal and now I have only 1 empowered attack left. And after I use this second attack, my lifesteal goes down because there's no more attacks. This is a pretty simple spell, it just allows Udyr to sustain more. Now the awakened effect just amps up these effects. You gain more lifesteal, a larger shield, a larger heal, and you also restore health over a few seconds. So right now if I awaken my W, you can see the fact that I heal up a bit and then my next 2 attacks will heal me even more. I would also like to point out the interaction that Udyr's W has with the Ravenous Hydra active. When you activate Ravenous Hydra, you will apply lifesteal. So right now you can see that I have 12% lifesteal. If I use my Ravenous Hydra active right now, I'm going to heal 60 health. Udyr's W gives you increased lifesteal for the next 2 attacks. Because of this, what you can do is activate W first, and before you do the 2 attacks, you activate Ravenous Hydra. This way, the Ravenous Hydra will heal you even more because you have even more lifesteal. So I will show it one more time without using W. You can see that I heal 62 health there. And now I'm going to press my W, and and then activate Ravenous Hydra, and you can see that I healed 137. This can allow you to heal up to full health very easily as AD Udyr if you go for Ravenous Hydra. Because you go in the middle of a wave, awaken your W, activate your Ravenous Hydra, and you're at full HP. Now let's move on to Udyr's E. When you activate this stance, Udyr will gain some movement speed that decays over the next few seconds. And then any attack that he does afterwards in this stance will stun up the opponent. So I activate my E here, I gain that movement speed, and when I attack this target dummy here, I stun it. You can also see this timer on it. The stun itself has a cooldown per target, so it's not like you can just attack one target multiple times and stun it continuously. You have to wait for this cooldown to go down and then you can restun. But as long as there's no cooldown on the enemy, you can chain stun multiple people that are nearby. So I can stun this person and then stun up this one and then stun up this one. There is also a very small lunge that Udyr does when he actually goes to stun up a target. So you can see there that I do a slight jump. But now that the target can't be stunned again, I don't do the jump. And if I go once again when the target is able to be stunned, I lunge again. It's a very small lunge, but it can help. Now when Udyr awakens this ability, he will get even more movement speed and gain crowd control immunity. This means you can ignore stuff like Morgana Q, Lux Binding, Maokai W root, and so on. You can also use it to ignore stuff like Mordekaiser ultimate if timed properly. And another thing that's actually pretty good to know here is that when you awaken Udyr's E, you will gain a bit of extra range as well. So right now I'm at 125 range. But when I awaken my E, I go to 200. This means that while you are awakened in your E, it will be easier to get to your target and stun them up. Combined with the fact that you have crowd control immunity, it means that you can walk up to the target rather easily and stun them up. There's a few other things I want to point out when it comes to Udyr's awakened E. For one, if you are rooted already and you awaken your E, it won't break you out of the root. So right here I can look to charge at Morgana, she roots me, and I awaken my E, and despite the fact that I'm CC immune, I don't get out of it. This means that if a Lux hits a binding on you and you're already rooted, you can't awaken E to get out of it. Unlike something like an Olaf ultimate that breaks you out of crowd control and makes you CC immune, this only makes you CC immune. And another thing that's worth noting about Udyr's awakened E is that it will not cleanse slows that are already on you. While you are CC immune, you won't feel the slow, but after your E ends, if the slow is still on you, you won't get rid of it. So in this situation, I'm going to walk up to this Nasus and he will wither me. And you will see that when I awaken my E, I am immune to his wither, but now that my awaken E is out, you saw that I was still slowed. What you need to do is be CC immune before the slow lands in the first place. So if I were to do the exact same thing where I walk up to the Nasus and he withers me, but I awaken my E first before his wither connects on me, I will ignore the W entirely. So I'm going to charge at him and then become CC immune, and you can see the fact that the wither isn't on me at all. Even after my CC immunity is down, I still do not get slowed. This can be pretty good to know if the enemy team has a lot of slows and slows that last for a long time. Let's say you get hit by an Olaf Q from max range. What you want to do is awaken your E just before you get hit so that you are actually not slowed after your awaken ends. And now we move on to Udyr's R. When Udyr activates this spell, he will deal some damage around himself and he will also slow the enemies that are near him. Additionally, his next two attacks will deal a bit of bonus magic damage. So if I cast my R here, you can see that I have this field that slows down and deals damage, and then my next two attacks deal a bit of bonus damage. Now what the Awaken does is that it makes your Storm unleashed. When you unleash the Storm, it will actually go off of you and go onto a nearby enemy. If there are some minions nearby, it will actually prioritize going for a champion if it can. The Storm will also slow by a bit more, and it's going to deal some bonus damage. So I press my R as normal and then I awaken it, and you can see the fact that it's sitting on this target right here and not around me. You can also sort of control the Storm by attacking what you want the Storm to go on. So for example, in this case, let's say I don't want the Storm to hit this person. What I do is attack this one and it will swap. and if I wanted to go back, I can attack again. And you can see that the storm moves back and forth. There's a few things to note here about the Awakened R. For one, you won't deal any more damage around yourself when you unleash the ultimate. Once you use this, you can see the fact that you deal no damage around yourself. This target dummy takes damage, but this one doesn't take any damage. But if you have a bunch of ability haste, you can use your R again before your unleashed storm ends. This makes it to where there will be 2 circles. So what I'm going to do is awaken my R here, and because I have a bunch of ability haste, I can use my R before the first storm ends. And that way you have an additional circle of damage. This happens very rarely, but it can happen if you buy a lot of ability haste on Udyr. And there's one more thing I want to note about Udyr's Awakened R. As I said previously, if you want the circle to go somewhere else, you can attack a target and the circle will go there. But if the target dies from your attack, then the circle won't leave. So in this situation, let's say I awaken my R and the target dummy gets hit by the awakened R and the circle goes over there. If I were to attack a minion here, it's going to swap to the minion, but if I kill the minion with the attack, you can see that it doesn't even move towards it. So if I were to show you how it would happen if the target does not die, you can see that it goes there, and when I attack this cannon minion, it swaps to the cannon. The moment that cannon dies, it will swap back to its preferred target. And this would essentially do it for Udyr's abilities. For the summoner spells that Udyr can take, I'm going to go over them very quickly because there's not that much to say here. The summoner spell you're always going to run, or almost always, is going to be Flash, and then after that you can do something like Flash Teleport or Flash Ignite, even Flash Ghost. There are some very specific cases where I go Ghost Teleport, but again that is super Omega specific. Flash Ignite is my default take here, and the reason it's my default take is because I want to be aggressive in the early game and I don't really like the teleport. There's some very specific matchups where I go Flash Ghost, and you can even take Flash Exhaust, but I don't really do it. And then Flash Teleport is like the safest setup that you can take, and one that I usually take into a lot of ranged matchups. You can take it into something like Aurora or Kennen, or into tanks where you know the Ignite won't really matter. If you're laning a champion like Sion, Cho'Gath, Malphite, you probably don't need the Ignite, and it probably won't make a difference in the 1v1. It could give you a bit more kill pressure, but I'd say it's not really needed always. But there's some ranged matchups where I go Flash Ghost or Flash Ignite. This would essentially be it for the summoner spell. Pretty basic here, there's not much else to say honestly. Now we get to the runes, and here there is a lot to say. Before I actually jump into explaining the setups that I take, I want to say something. Experiment as much as you can with the runes. Try a bunch of different ones. Maybe you like how Hail of Blades feels when you play AD Udyr. Maybe you play with Arcane Comet and try to perma-poke with your Awaken R that way. Maybe you take a setup with Summon Airy to do the same thing with Arcane Comet to poke. Maybe you find a spellbook page that you like. Udyr is extremely flexible when it comes to his runes, so I heavily recommend experimenting with a bunch of different rune combinations and see what you like best. I'm going to showcase here what I take, but again I encourage you to experiment with a lot of different stuff. Just because I don't run a rune page, it doesn't mean it's bad necessarily. It's just something that I don't dabble with personally. This rune page right here is usually what I take on AD Udyr. The keystone rune will be Press the Attack. I like it more than Conqueror in most cases because AD Udyr is more focused on bursting. You could take Conqueror into a tank matchup like a Malphite or a Cassante, but I really like the Press the Attack burst here. Then after that you can take Triumph, you can also take Presence of Mind if you really want to for a bit more mana regen, and even Absorb Life is okay if you want more sustain. And then for the Legend tree you can take either one of these three honestly. The reason I like Legend Bloodline most is because Udyr will auto attack a lot if he goes AD Udyr, and the lifesteal works with Ravenous Hydra. The Ravenous Hydra active will heal you, and the more lifesteal you have, the more it will heal. So whenever you rush Ravenous Hydra, you can take Legend Bloodline to get even more healing. But if you're not running Ravenous Hydra, you can take Legend Alacrity for the attack speed, or even Legend Haste. Legend Haste gives you basic ability haste, but because all of your abilities are considered basic spells, the Legend Haste will reduce all of them. It will reduce your Q, W, E, and R. It won't reduce your Awaken cooldown, but it will reduce those 4 spells. And then for the last 3 here, honestly, all 3 can be taken on Udyr. I just prefer Last Stand most of the time, but I'd say these aren't that phenomenal for him. Coup de Grace is decent if you want to have more burst when the enemy is low, and Cut Down is okay, but I take this more on AP Udyr. And then you have Last Stand, which I'd say is sort of the default take. Now, as for the secondary page here, it is going to be Inspiration with triple tonic and approach velocity most of the time. Approach velocity is really good for Udyr because you gain movement speed whenever you impair the movement of an enemy. What you do basically every single time as Udyr is take at least 1 point into your Phoenix early game. By doing that, you make sure that approach velocity always kicks in when you fight someone as long as you slow them with Phoenix. You don't need to put more points into it, you can just put that 1 point. And that way you slow down the enemy and speed yourself up. And then the other rune that I take here is going to be triple tonic. I won't go over what triple tonic does right now because I will have a section in the actual rune section where I talk just about triple tonic. In short, it gives you 3 potions, and the potions you get at level 6 and level 9 are especially good for Udyr. But again, I will talk about this rune later on into the rune section, because there is a lot I want to say about it. And as for the small shards, these can be changed. Most of the time I take double adaptive force here and then scaling health. But you can change the first one to attack speed if you want, you can change the second one to the movement speed or health, and then the last one can have flat health if you want to fight a lot pre-6, and the tenacity and slow resist shard is pretty good if the enemy team has a lot of crowd control. You can also take it for some specific matchups like Gragas or Nasus. Another page I run as AD Udyr is this one that you see on screen right now with Fleet Footwork as your keystone and Resolve secondary. This one is taken very specifically into ranged matchups that want to hyperbully you. Think champions like Kennen or Aurora. Into those champions you need a lot of sustain. So the Fleet Footwork will give you a bit of healing and that movement speed when you actually proc it, which can be good because it can allow you to dodge more of their spells. Then you have Absorb Life, which just gives you more health because whenever you kill something you restore a bit of health. And then you have Second Wind with Revitalize. When you run this page you won't have the approach velocity movement speed and no triple tonic, but unfortunately you have to take Second Wind Revitalize into a matchup like Kennen or Aurora. And this is because if you don't, you will be perma poked and killed on cooldown. You need to get as much sustain as you can. The Second Wind is very nice because it just gives you that healing whenever you get damaged by an enemy champion, and then Revitalize increases the strength that your heals and shields have. This means that whenever you use your W and awaken it, the shield strength of W is increased and the heal strength. And this also works for your Absorb Life and Fleet Footwork. And if you decide to go for items like Spirit Visage or Ravenous Hydra, you get even more sustain. This is another page that you can run, and this one can be run on both AD Udyr and AP Udyr. Right here I have Grasp of the Undying as my keystone rune and Inspiration as my secondary tree. The Grasp can be pretty good if you want a short trade and not really hard engage. It gives you that one attack that can heal you and deal a bit of damage. And then you also have Shield Bash here, which is really good. The reason Shield Bash is really good is because whenever you activate your W, you will get a Shield Bash proc. And because Udyr uses his W a lot in lane, it's pretty good. It can allow you to deal way more damage in lane. And then you can take Second Wind Revitalize, or you can also take Conditioning if you want more scaling in the mid to late game for more armor and MR, or even Bone Plating into champions like Riven or Renekton if you want to take it. And then once again you can have Triple Tonic with Approach Velocity. But you can change, for example, Triple Tonic to Biscuit Delivery to have even more sustain. If you really want to, you can go for something like Magical Footwear Approach Velocity as well, or Triple Tonic Magical Footwear. And this can be pretty good too, but you will feel the loss of Approach Velocity. Though Magical Footwear does feel pretty nice as a rune. There's also some very specific situations where I run Cashback on Udyr on my secondary page when I go Inspiration. This one just gives you more gold whenever you purchase a legendary item. This This one can be taken very specifically if you know the lane that you're gonna fight is going to be super uninteractive and you want to either perma side lane or just get to your legendary items quicker. And then you can take something like cashback triple tonic or cashback approach velocity. If you also buy a coal in the laning phase, in the mid game at 3 items, you can have around 800 extra gold. Perhaps even more than that in some cases from the cashback plus coal. Now this page right here is the one that I go for on AP Udyr most of the time if I play AP Bruiser Udyr. You have Conqueror as your keystone rune because I think with AP Udyr you just duel more, especially if you play AP Bruiser, so you have more time to stack it up. Then you take Legend Haste because you won't really have a lot of AD, so the lifesteal from Legend Bloodline isn't as good, and Legend Alacrity can be taken as well if you want. And then here you take Cut Down instead of Coup de Grace or Last Stand most of the time, I'd say. The reason you take Cut Down is because in the mid game you're going to awaken your Phoenix a lot to try to soften the enemy, and most of the time they will have high health. So due to this, you can do some decent damage with Cut Down, but it's also not bad in the lane if you're fighting something like a Cassante or Malphite, Ornn, and they just stay at above 60% health. You just deal more damage to them. I also take Phase Rush on Udyr sometimes, and you can take Phase Rush on both AD Udyr and AP Udyr. Phase Rush allows you to short trade very well. If you are playing AP Udyr, all you need to do is use your R and then awaken it instantly, and then Phase Rush procs, and then you can run away. And you can keep awakening your R like that on the enemy until they die. Now, as for the other runes that you have in the sorcery tree, I'm going to go over them. The first one here is Axiom Arcanist. Axiom Arcanist increases the healing, damage, and shielding that your ultimate does. Udyr does not have a traditional ultimate, so the increase goes to his Awaken spell. And when you get a takedown, the Awaken gets reduced by 7%. This can allow you to do more damage with your R, Q, and then heal and shield more with your W. Not much else to it, it can feel pretty nice. But you also have the option of going Mana Flow Band. This rune can give you more mana in the early game, which actually feels pretty good. You can get up to a bonus of 250 mana, and then you get an effect once fully stacked, which says that you will restore 1% of your missing mana every 5 seconds. Do not sleep on this rune, it's actually pretty good in the early game. Most of the time, Udyr is a very mana-hungry champion, especially if you play AP Udyr. And this is because you will constantly spam that W to heal and shield and the Phoenix. So you can take either Axiom Arcanist or Mana Flow Band, both work. Then the next one here is going to be Celerity. Celerity just gives you more speed, that's basically it. This can be pretty good because it can amp up your phase rush speed, and it can make sure that if you run approach velocity you get more speed from that, on top of the fact that you also press your E so you get even more speed from that, so it's pretty good for those. But you also have the option of going Transcendence. With Transcendence you get a maximum of 10 ability haste at level 8, and then at level 11 you get a new effect. It's not that bad, but I think the movement speed that Celerity gives you is overall better in most cases. And then the final option that I sometimes run here is going to be Absolute Focus. This one gives you bonus attack damage or ability power when you are above 70% health. If you are just constantly awakening your W to stay healthy, you can get the attack damage or ability power very easily. And this can matter quite a lot, especially if you play AP Udyr, because you can send your Phoenix zone onto an opponent and deal more damage from this. But again, I think most of the time it's just better to take Celerity. You can take Absolute Focus though if you want to deal maximum damage. And then the last one right here is always going to be Gathering Storm. You technically have the option of going Scorch too, but I don't really see it. Unless you go for something like Summon Airy and then take Scorch for even more poking, I don't recommend it. You could try it, I just personally don't do it. And then once again, I will most likely run Triple Tonic with Approach Velocity secondary, or maybe something like Cashback with Triple Tonic. This can work too for something like full AP Udyr. And I will talk about full AP Udyr more later into the guide. I will briefly mention the Domination tree as well because it can be run if you want. Specifically, Ultimate Hunter is quite good, because the ultimate haste you get from Ultimate Hunter is placed on the Awaken cooldown, and you can even combine it with items like Malignance or Experimental Hexblade or Zeke's Convergence. All of these items give ultimate haste, and it ensures you reduce your Awaken passive cooldown. In the super late game, if you have a fully stacked Ultimate Hunter and have 2 ultimate haste giving items, you can have your Awaken cooldown at around 12 seconds instead of the 20, maybe maybe even lower. And that can actually make a world of difference. And then what you can do is take Cheap Shot as another option on the secondary, which isn't bad, or Taste of Blood for more healing, or even Sudden Impact. Sudden Impact is not actually completely wasted on Udyr, and this is because whenever you dash, you deal some damage. And Udyr's E is considered a lunge. So because it's considered a lunge, it will proc the sudden impact damage whenever you jump. And now to talk about Triple Tonic. And this section is specifically going to go over Triple Tonic and no other rune. I think Triple Tonic is one of the best runes that Udyr can take. It feels absolutely incredible on him. What the rune does is it gives you potions at level 3, 6, and 9. And each one of these potions has a unique effect. Starting with the potion that you get at level 3, it is going to be the Elixir of Avarice. When you use this elixir, you will deal a bit of bonus true damage to enemy minions for a minute, and when the effect ends, you get some gold. The minion damage is honestly nothing crazy, it's just 5 extra true damage every time you attack. It can be okay on a character like Udyr because he auto attacks a lot, but you would literally need to auto attack 10 times to do 50 true damage on a minion. But that doesn't mean it's necessarily weak. You do get that gold once the effect ends, and it's 60 gold right now. That is basically a free cannon minion, which can allow you to recall on more gold and maybe get more items on that first recall. Then we move on to the second potion that you get at level 6, and this one is going to be the Elixir of Force. This one gives you adaptive force for a minute, that's it. It seems very basic, but it's actually pretty good for Udyr. Udyr does not have an actual ultimate that he levels up at 6. Due to this, most champions get a significant power spike in the 1v1 against Udyr. A champion like Darius or Garen, Ornn, any champion that has an actual ultimate will gain a spike, as long as that ultimate can be used in the 1v1 obviously. This Elixir of Force ensures that you also get a power spike at 6. It obviously won't match the strength of a Darius getting his ultimate or something, but you just get more damage. For AP Udyr in particular, level 6 is when you can also put another point into your queue. You could put a point at level 5 or level 4, like for example I can do it right now, but if I want to just max out my Phoenix and put the 3 points, I'm gonna need to wait to 6. And now at level 6 I can put another point in my W or E or put my first point in the queue. And if you put that point into your queue and pop your Elixir of Force, you can do a lot of damage to an enemy if they're isolated because you get that awakened Q off. And now we get to the final potion that you get at level 9, and this is going to be the Elixir of Skill. This elixir just grants you a skill point, that's it. So if I were to press my Elixir of Skill right now, you can see that now I can level up another spell again. And Udyr is all about his skill points. The spells you max dictate your playstyle, so getting an extra skill point is even better for Udyr. Let's say you start off as AP Udyr and you put something like 3 points in your R, and now you want to go into AD Udyr. Maybe you took the 3 points in the R in the early game so that you have a stronger early game, and then you start maxing your Q, so at level 7, 8 you put another 2 points into your Q, and now you have 3 points into Q. Now at level 9, when you level up, you can use the Elixir of Skill and you will be able to put another 2 points into Q at level 9. And just like that, I now have 5 points into my Q at level 9, despite putting 3 points in my R early. You can put maybe something like 4 or 5 points into your W early and then start maxing your Q or R. You have to sacrifice more damage in the early game for survivability because you put points in your W, but at level 9 you can put that extra skill point into Q or R. But this isn't even where the greatness of the Triple Tonic ends. In this case, I have Triple Tonic on Darius here, and I go to level 9 and I get that extra skill point and I can activate it and place it in my E in this case. You can't put points into your ultimate with Triple Tonic. And now as I continue to level up, I can keep putting more points into my spells. Obviously, I would get my E maxed out at level 12 here instead of 13, and then at level 17 I have maxed out all of my spells. You can see that my Q, W, E, and ultimate have full points in them. And this is because of that triple tonic. Normally you put full points into your spells at level 18. Right here I'm going to level up to level 18, and you can see the fact that I gain no extra skill point because there's no room to place a skill point. And then obviously if I complete my top lane quest and I go to level 19 and 20, once again I don't get any skill points. However, this is not the case for Udyr. You can see right here that I level up once again, I get that level 9, I pop my triple tonic, I start maxing my spells, and now let's say I go to level 17 as before, and I have my points into my Q, W, E, and ulti. Udyr cannot max out all of his spells, so because of this, when I get to level 18 here, you can see that a skill point still pops up. Udyr maintains the skill point that triple tonic gives, meaning that unlike every other champion in the game, you can actually use triple tonic in the super late game. The way triple tonic normally works is that it gives you a temporary buff of some kind. The first elixir gives you that on-hit damage and that gold, but once you're full build, the gold doesn't matter anymore. The elixir of skill gives you adaptive force for 1 minute, but once that minute ends, it's over, you get nothing anymore. And the elixir of skill gives you that extra skill point until level 17. Once you hit level 18, that elixir no longer matters. But Udyr does not have this issue, and as such he can keep the point even in the super late game. Even if I were to complete my top lane quest here and go to level 20, I can still level up my R twice. So right now I have 6 points in my Q, W, and E and 3 points in my R. So not only do I get a stronger level 6 because of the elixir of force, and a bit of extra gold because of the elixir of avarice, I also abuse the mid-game power that the elixir of skill gives me by having that extra skill point, and I still maintain the skill point in the super late game, ensuring that I always use this rune no matter what. And this is why I dedicated this specific part right here just to talk about triple tonic. I think it is an absolutely incredible rune for Udyr. And this would essentially be it for the summoner spell and rune section of the guide. Before jumping into the items, I want to say something. Much like with the runes, you should experiment a lot with Udyr's itemization. You can go AD split push Udyr, AP bruiser Udyr, full AP Udyr, getting an insane amount of movement speed, a build where your sole purpose is to apply as many debuffs to the enemy team as you can, lethality Udyr, some kind of crit Udyr build, whatever this build is supposed to be, support/utility Udyr, I guess? My point is that you can take almost every single item in the shop on Udyr. There's some that I personally don't do, like for example how I don't really play crit Udyr, but I can see an angle for it. So I definitely encourage you to experiment and try different setups and see what you like. If you want to know my thoughts about every single item that I take, I have a mobafire guide where I share those thoughts. On the guide you will find descriptions for every single item that I personally take on Udyr, as well as breaking down Udyr's abilities, explaining mid to late game stages, and more. The mobafire guide also has a matchup spreadsheet. And this matchup spreadsheet has a spreadsheet for AD Udyr and for AP Udyr. You can swap between the two. So if you want to know how to play against Darius as AP Udyr and AD Udyr, you can look at the spreadsheet and you will see it. You will find the guide link in the video description. Now let's actually jump into the items that Udyr can take. So at first I am going to look at the starter items that Udyr can take, and then I'm going to look at some larger item components that he can take. Then I will go over every boot choice, and then I will go over some legendary items, but not every single legendary item that Udyr can take. In my opinion, there are 4 starter items that Udyr can take, and 2 of them are very situational. The one starter item that you're going to take 90% of the time is going to be Doran's Ring. This gives you some ability power, health, and then it gives you some mana restoration. This item is really good for Udyr because even if you play AD Udyr, most most of the time you're going to put at least 1 point in your R, maybe 2 or even 3. And that way the ability power you gain from Doran's Ring will amplify your R damage even more. So in the early game you can get an advantage by having this Doran's Ring. The second most common option that I run on Udyr is going to be Tear of the Goddess. And this one I take only if I go for AD Udyr. What I do most of the time when I start Tear of the Goddess is put at least 3 points into my W and then max my Q. And I will usually also have 1 point in my R. What you want to do when you have Tear of the Goddess is just awaken your W constantly and sustain up. The reason I do this on AD Udyr and never on AP Udyr is because I think Doran's Ring is just better for AP Udyr every single time. But there's also the fact that when you get that extra adaptive force from your tiny runes, you start off with attack damage. Right now you can see the fact that I have 82 attack damage. I have a base of 71 and then 11 bonus. And if I were to expand my runes further, you can see here that I have +5 attack damage twice. If I were to start with Tear of the Goddess, that doesn't change. I still have the 82 damage. So if I purchase this Doran's Ring, the bonus attack damage changes to bonus ability power. You can see that I have the 18 AP here and 9 ability power twice here. There's also the fact that Tear of the Goddess can build into either Winter's Approach or Manamune if you play AD Udyr. What I like to do is upgrade Tear of the Goddess on AD Udyr into Manamune a lot of the time, or if I'm playing AP Bruiser Udyr, I can upgrade it into a Winter's Approach. And for full AP Udyr, very rarely I go for Archangel's Staff. The other two starting items that you can take would be Doran's Blade or Doran's Shield. Doran's Blade gives you more dueling power when you have your Q, but the reason I tend to stay away from it is because most of the time in the early game, people will just sit in the minion wave. And if they sit in the minion wave, your Q won't deal the isolated damage. So if you walk up to a Darius or a Set or Urgot, they will just straight up beat you even with your Q. Even if you were to get the awakened Q attacks in and somehow the target was isolated, you would still lose the 1v1 most likely. Playing around Udyr's R in the early game is just way more reliable. So because of that, I tend to stay away from it. But you can take it if you want to. For example, it's not that terrible into Irelia, I'd say. And the other option, which is Doran's Shield, I only really take this if I go for AP Udyr. But the issue is that you won't get the mana regen of Doran's Ring, and it won't swap over your bonus attack damage from the tiny runes. Which means that you might need to take an early recall and buy an early Dark Seal or an Amplifying Tome to swap over to the actual ability power gain. Those would be the starter items that you can take on Udyr, I'd say. But on the first recall, you have the option of getting an early call as well if you want to get more gold, or you can even get a Dark Seal because this is a very good item. Even on AD Udyr, I sometimes purchase this item and sit on it because it's very good. When you buy it, it's already 100% gold effective. I'm pretty sure it's a bit over 100%. But if you manage to fully stack it, it's going to be really good. And you don't need to upgrade it into Magi, you can just leave it at this and get a lot of value from this purchase. Now I'm going to look at some larger item components that Udyr can purchase. Starting off with the heal cut items, you have Executioner's Calling and Oblivion Orb here, and you only take these if you need heal cut. If you play AP Udyr, you take Oblivion Orb. If you play AD Udyr, you play Executioner's Calling. And in some very specific matchups, such as Urgot or Tryndamere, you can take Bramble Vest, because the armor is really good on top of the reflect damage and the grievous wounds. And usually I go Bramble Vest when I play AP Bruiser Udyr. On AD Udyr, I tend to stay away from tankier items. But if you play some kind of AD Bruiser Udyr where you're more focused on gaining a bunch of health and not really bursting people, you can take this. Purchasing an early Negatron Cloak can be good into some specific ranged matchups like Kennen or Aurora or Azir if you happen to lane it, since it will give you a lot of survivability, but the main issue with it is that it does not build into Spirit Visage. So because it does not build into it, most of the time what I like to do is just buy a no magic mantle and sit on it. Or I will actually buy the Spectre Scowl, which is more expensive, but it builds towards the Spirit Visage. And Spirit Visage is a very powerful item for Udyr. Aether Wisp can be a decent component that you can take on Udyr, especially if you want to rush Cosmic Drive. But that's about it, really. In the early game, I will never purchase it aside from that. Then you have Faded Ashes, which is a very good component because it gives you some good wave clear and damage. And it builds into Liandry and Blackfire Torch. If you play AP Bruiser Udyr, you can go into that Liandry nicely, or if you play full AP Udyr, you can go into Blackfire Torch. Then we have Vampiric Scepter here, and this is a pretty good component when you go into Ravenous Hydra. It will give you that lifesteal and attack damage, not much else to it, but it's pretty good. The next item component that Udyr can take is Sheen. This one is actually not that bad when you look to rush Iceborne Gauntlet, Dusk and Dawn, or Trinity Force. The actual Sheen damage will give you more healing on your W. Right now I am pretty chunked, and when I press my W and attack this target dummy, you can see the fact that I heal 25 health on both hits. But the way Sheen works with Udyr's W is that when you attack the target while you have that Sheen damage, you will heal more. So in this example, I have a Sheen, but I have not bought anything else. My damage is exactly the same. I have no additional points in my W. But when I press my W here, you can see that the first attack heals me for 36. The second one heals me again 24, but that's because I no longer have the Sheen damage. So if I press W again, I will proc up that Sheen and heal more. This just gives you a nice way to heal up more, and Udyr just spams his spells constantly. So because of that, you can constantly weave in Sheen procs whenever you're fighting someone, if you're fighting them for an extended period of time. And the Sheen effect also procs whenever you awaken a spell, which is pretty good to know. Serrated Dirk is actually very powerful, and sometimes I actually buy this item on my first recall as AD Udyr. If you manage to get this and you fight someone and you awaken your Q and the target is isolated, they're probably going to die immediately. The damage from this item is incredible. Then you have Warden's Mail, and I only take this in some specific matchups where I need to tank up a lot, like into a Tryndamere or Urgot, let's say. And I will usually take it on AP Bruiser Udyr, but sometimes I take it on AD Bruiser Udyr as well. Caulfield's Warhammer is a decent component, and it just allows you to build towards Ravenous Hydra. But most of the time this is the last component I purchase from Ravenous Hydra. Next up we have Phage, and this is not a bad component to take whenever you take one of the items that actually builds out of it. So when you rush Trinity Force or Experimental Hexblade or Stridebreaker or Cleaver, this component can feel pretty nice. Then we have Lost Chapter, and I only take this component early on if I am playing full AP Udyr. And this is because it gives you a lot of mana. Because once I get that Lost Chapter, whenever I level up, I gain more mana back. On top of the fact that the Lost Chapter itself gives you 300 mana. And this item builds towards Malignance and Blackfire Torch. And as full AP Udyr, I am going to look to rush Malignance most of the time. Then we have Tiamat, and this one is taken when you want wave clear for AD Udyr. AD Udyr has absolutely no wave clear. You can take points into your Phoenix to get wave clear, but if you don't, you have zero wave clear. So by taking this Tiamat, you actually have a way to shove out waves quickly and then get a reset. Or you can even find some kind of proxy angle and then roam around the map. Then we have Haunting, guys, and this is a pretty standard component that AP Bruiser Udyr takes. Last Whisper is a decent component, and you only take this when you go AD Udyr and you want to take either Lord Dominic's Regards or Mortal Reminder. And then we have the Seeker's Armguard component here, and this one can be taken on both AP Bruiser Udyr and full AP Udyr. The stasis effect of this item is very nice, and when I get to Zanya's Hourglass, I will explain more why I think the stasis is so good. Now let's move on to the boots that Udyr can purchase. Boots of Swiftness give you some slow resist and more movement speed than other boots. This can allow you to reach people faster, and you don't get slowed down as much. They're just some decent boots to take. It allows you to move around quicker. Then we have Plated Steel Caps. These boots are very powerful into some specific lanes like Seth, Tryndamere, Urgot, and so on. They will give you that auto attack damage reduction, and they will give you the armor plus movement speed. Combining the Plated Steel Caps movement speed and your Phoenix slow zone allows you to kite out people really well. Then we have Mercury Treads, and you only take these ones if you need the tenacity from them. The magic resist that these boots give you is absolutely laughable. A no magic mantle gives you the same magic resist, and it only costs 400 gold. So if you want more magic resist, you can just take a Spectre's Cowl, which is the same cost as Mercury Treads but gives you more MR and more defensive stats. However, if you need that tenacity, take the Mercury Treads. And then we have Sorcerer Shoes. I only take this when I go for full AP Udyr. The magic pen that these boots give is actually pretty good. If you combine it with the Malignance magic resist shred, it's actually pretty nice. It can allow you to deal way more damage, I'd say. Do not sleep on them, they're actually pretty good. And now I am going to discuss some of Udyr's legendary items and some legendary item spikes, as well as looking at some 3 item options or full build options. I'm going to start with AD Udyr, then I'm going to go into AP Bruiser Udyr, and then I'm going to talk about full AP Udyr as the last one. There's 2 items that AD Udyr will rush most of the time. You have Ravenous Hydra and Stridebreaker. You do also have the option of going Titanic Hydra or Trinity Force or even Experimental Hexblade, but these are more matchup dependent dependent, I'd say. The Ravenous Hydra gives you that wave clear and a lot of healing, like a lot of healing. Right here I have injured myself significantly, and when I actually press my W and then activate my Ravenous Hydra, you can see that I heal a significant amount. And this is because Udyr's W gives him lifesteal, and Ravenous Hydra benefits from lifesteal when you press that active. What I can also do is awaken my W and then press Ravenous Hydra, and then I heal even more. This gives you near infinite sustain in lane. The moment you purchase this, after every single trade you can walk up to the wave and then proc this and then walk away with full health. However, there's some matchups where you need Stridebreaker more because of the active. The active of Stridebreaker will give you a slow and speed whenever you tag an enemy champion, and this can allow you to catch up to certain champions like Cassiopeia, Gnar, and so on. That being said, there's some matchups where I go Ravenous Hydra even though I would need the Stridebreaker slow, and that's because some of these matchups are simply uncatchable. If I run into a cannon, for example, I'm not going to go Stridebreaker, and that's because he's just too quick for me even if I slow him down with Stridebreaker. So instead I get that Ravenous Hydra and heal up, but I won't rush Ravenous Hydra most of the time into cannon. And this is because Ravenous Hydra makes you very squishy. Yes, you can heal up to full health anytime you walk up to the wave with your W, but until you get the full Ravenous Hydra you can get bullied really hard. So because of that, I might look to rush Spirit Visage into Ravenous Hydra. Spirit Visage will amplify healing and shielding, and it will give you some health and magic resist. So because of that, it will amplify my W healing and shielding, and then it will amplify my Ravenous Hydra healing when I finally get it. And by rushing Spirit Visage, I ensure that I can tank through cannon's damage without dying. Trinity Force can be another item that you can rush on AD, Udyr, and Titanic Hydra can also be pretty strong. The active of Titanic Hydra gives you an auto attack reset. You can see right here that I'm attacking this target dummy, and when I go to actually activate the Titanic Hydra, you saw there that I did 2 quick attacks. This can allow you to burst someone down with your Q very easily if they don't expect it. The way you do it is that you charge at them with your E, then stun them up, and then immediately Q and awaken it, and then you do 2 quick attacks. And they basically die within the stun timer, and this is how it would look like. Experimental Hexplate is also another pretty good item for Udyr because the ultimate haste is not wasted. It actually goes to your awaken passive, and Udyr wants to have that passive up as much as possible. And the actual effect that you get when you cast the awaken is nice. A lot of attack speed and a lot of movement speed. Hullbreaker is another item that you can take on Udyr. Usually you will go for the combo of Ravenous Hydra with Hullbreaker and then Boots of Swiftness. And then your third item might be something like Lord Dominic's Regards. When you have these items right here, you are going to duel almost every single character in the game. You get a lot of healing from Ravenous Hydra, so you can perma-sustain. You get a lot of push power from the Hullbreaker, and then Lord Dominic's gives you some insane damage even into tanks. Udyr can already shred down tanks with his Q and awaken Q pretty easily, but when you get this LDR, you get even more shred power. But if you want to go for a more teamfight focused 3-core, you can get something like this, where you get Plated Steel Caps, Stridebreaker, Sterak's Gauge, and Spirit Visage. This will make you deal less damage and you won't have as much push power on side lane, but it will allow you to teamfight more. Generally speaking, I don't like to teamfight on AD Udyr, but you can do this if you want to. And when you go for a teamfight focused build, a final build can be something like this for AD Udyr. The Death's Dance is especially good on both AD Bruiser Udyr when you teamfight and AD Udyr when you're playing more to burst people. You might be able to join them and not get instantly exploded because of the ignore pain effect and then the defy effect. You can go in, and if you manage to burst someone down, that bleed gets healed up and then you can continue to fight. Now for a super split push focused build, you will get something like this. You have the Hullbreaker, Ravenous Hydra, and Lord Dominic's, and then the last 2 items can be situational. Most of the time, because I take an early tier of the goddess, I'm going to have Murmana, and Murmana feels quite powerful on Udyr. And then the final item is going to be something like a Yomu's Ghostblade, which gives you more mobility, it gives you that lethality and some good damage. But again, you can swap these out. Let's say you're playing against the Mordekaiser, you can take a Serpent's Fang instead of Yomu's to get that shield cut. You can swap the Lord Dominic's Regards to a Mortal Reminder if you need heal cut against a certain character. Maybe you really need QSS, so you take Mercurial. Now let's go for some items that Udyr can take when he plays the AP Bruiser style. The first one here is going to be Liandry. This is just a powerful item for him. Udyr's Phoenix burns people, and then this gives you more burn damage, and that's pretty good. It also gives you a good amount of health. Another item item that AP Bruiser Udyr can take is Bloodletter's Curse. So if you're in the middle of a teamfight as AP Udyr, you can awaken your R and shred down a lot of magic resist. And then if you combine it with Liandry's Torment, you will deal way more damage. Another item that AP Bruiser Udyr can take is Riftmaker. This one's also pretty good. It allows you to sustain more in fights and deal more damage. There's situations where you just want to stay in the thick of things. Let's say you're laning a Pantheon, you can take Riftmaker. The Omnivamp you get from this item actually feels pretty good into a matchup like that. But you also have the option of rushing Dusk and Dawn on AP Bruiser Udyr. The main reason you buy it is because whenever you attack with the Sheen effect, you proc on hit effects one more time. And Udyr's Q, W, and R count as on hit effects. To showcase what I mean, I'm going to attack this target dummy with my awakened Q. You can see that I activate my Q and now I awaken it, and I do one attack, I proc the lightning, and then I do the second attack and proc the lightning again. But with Dusk and Dawn, after I awaken my Q and attack the target dummy only once, I will use both strikes. So I activate my Q here and then awaken it, and I use only one attack and it procced both strikes. This can work for Udyr's W as well, which is also 2 procs, the normal one or the awaken one, and the same goes for his ultimate that also has 2 strikes. The stats of the item are quite good for Udyr and the effect is pretty nice. AP Bruiser Udyr has some other items that he can take that are tankier as well. You can take something like Unending Despair or Winter's Approach or Frozen Heart. All of these can be good. A 3-core combo that can be pretty good for AP Bruiser Udyr is this one. All of these items give you great tankiness. But you also have the option of going for a 3-core like this one, and this one gives you a lot of dueling power, but you won't be as tanky. If you want to do a 3-core that's kind of in the middle in terms of damage and tankiness, you can do something like this. You can change that Liandry to Riftmaker or Bloodletters. Maybe you buy Liandry plus Bloodletter and you change out the Winter's Approach. Most of the time though, you will end up rushing Liandry, and then after that a tanky item. But there's some matchups where rushing a tank item can be pretty good. Sometimes you need to rush Spirit Visage or even something like Thornmail or Frozen Heart. For example, into Urgot you can rush Thornmail as AP Bruiser Udyr and it doesn't feel that bad. And then after that you can get something like Riftmaker. And then you can actually just sit in melee range and duel him out pretty well, I'd say. A full build that you can do on AP Bruiser Udyr is this one right here. And you can swap out some of these items to get more damage or more tankiness. Maybe instead of Riftmaker you need to shred down magic resist, so you take Bloodletter's Curse. Maybe you sell Liandry and get Unending Despair. Or maybe the enemy comp has a lot of crit, so you might sell one of your defensive items and buy a Ronduin. But this is just a solid build overall, though again, you can change it a lot. And now we move on to full AP Udyr. In my opinion, it's not actually troll to go full AP Udyr. I would say it scales pretty well because of the amount of damage you deal. The main issue with full AP Udyr is that it's pretty bad in the laning phase. So unless you get a super free lane where you get to scale really hard, it's not worth to go for it. And instead you should go for either AD Udyr or AP Bruiser Udyr. The item I end up rushing most on full AP Udyr is Malignance. This item gives you some ultimate ability haste, which goes into your awaken passive cooldown, which is pretty nice. The amount of ability power and mana is really good, but the actual hate fog effect is also pretty good. And this is because it both shreds down magic resist and deals some more damage. And if you combine the Malignance shred with the Sorcerer Shoes shred, you get a lot of extra damage. The way the zone gets applied is when you attack with your awakened Q or awaken R. So if I were to awaken my Q right here and attack this target dummy, you can see the zone underneath it. And the zone also applies this way if you damage someone with your R. You don't need to actually auto attack them, you just have to make sure that your awakened R hits them. So in this situation I press my R and then I awaken it, and you can see the fact that the Malignance procced under each one of these target dummies. In my eyes, this is a very powerful item that full AP Udyr can rush. What I tend to do after Malignance is Blackfire Torch. This will just give you some more burn power, but it also has the Blackfire passive. The Blackfire passive can actually give you a lot of extra ability power in teamfights. You get 4% AP per champion that you burn, and in teamfights Udyr wants to awaken his R on multiple people. So because of that, if you hit 3 people, that's a 12% increase to your ability power, which might not seem like much, but if you have something like 300 ability power, that's an extra 30 AP for free, a little bit over 30. And then as my third item on full AP Udyr, I like to take Rabadon's Death Cap because it gives you a lot of damage. This 3-core is what I aim to take on full AP Udyr in the mid game. Once you get this, you will get a lot of extra damage. You can awaken your R, and if it hits 2 or 3 people, it might single-handedly win the fight on the spot. Even against tanks, the awaken R damage is not bad because your awakened R deals percent health damage. So because of that, both tanks and squishies will fall. But if there's some hyper tank that builds a lot of magic resist like an Ornn with Kaenic Rookhorn, you might need to take a Void Staff. Void Staff just amps up your damage even further. It gives you a lot of magic pen and a good amount of ability power. But if you do not need extra magic penetration, you can actually take Zhonya's Hourglass. The main reason I like to take this is because full AP Udyr is very squishy. And while you are in that stasis, your R zone still goes out, even if you don't awaken it. So I have purchased Zhonya's right now, and I press my R and then Zhonya's, and you can see the fact that I still deal the damage around me, which gives me more time to kill the opponent with my regular R. But it can also give you more time to kill them with the awakened R, because you can flash on top of the enemies and then awaken your R and then Zhonya's. And then by the time you get out of the Zhonya's, the enemies are dead. You can even take Zhonya's Hourglass instead of Blackfire Torch as a second item if you want, or even instead of Rabadon's Death Cap. And a full build for full AP Udyr will look like this most of the time. But you can swap some of these items if you want. For example, you can take a Storm Surge instead of Zhonya's, or a Shadow Flame if you want way more damage. You can also take Liandry if you want in this build, and then you have the Blackfire Torch burn plus Liandry burn, and that works pretty well. You can take Crypt Bloom instead of Void Staff if you want to get more utility instead of the damage and magic pen. And this would essentially do it for the items that Udyr can take. Again, I didn't look at every single one, but I looked at most of them and tried to explain the ones that I use most often. Most of the time what you're going to do either as AP Udyr or AD Udyr is start with Doran's Ring. AP Udyr is incredibly powerful, especially at level 1. So what you're going to look to do at level 1 is to walk into the enemy and then awaken your R and then walk away. If the enemy tries to fight you, they will probably die or lose like 70% of their health. They need to respect that level 1 always whenever you have your R taken. Even if you play AD Udyr, I strongly suggest you start with your R and take Doran's Ring as your starting item. This way you can heavily abuse the fact that you are super powerful at level 1. And because you start Doran's Ring, you also have more mana regen, which is pretty good since Udyr is generally a pretty mana hungry champion in the early game. If the enemy hyper respects you, it's not the end of the world. Ideally you manage to push them off of the minion XP. That is the best case scenario if they super respect you. There's very few champions that will beat you at level 1 if you have pressed the attack with Ignite and you awaken your R. But if you're unsure of whether or not you're going to win it, you can play it slowly and start with your W. If you start with your W, then you would just play it very slowly and awaken your W to sustain. Sometimes as AD Udyr, I'm going to start Tear of the Goddess instead of Doran's Ring and take my W at level 1. This way I won't hyper fight the opponent, but I will have a lot of lane sustain, because I will have that tier 4 mana, and that means I can use my W way more. And speaking of W, do not be afraid to just awaken your W in the middle of the lane to get some health back. It does seem weird because you're just gonna use an awaken spell to get some extra healing on minions, and your shield might not even block that much damage, but it's honestly not that bad to just awaken your W in lane if you need to sustain more. The same goes for your Q and R if you just want to go into a short trade. Yes, you can hold on to your awaken, but sometimes it's not needed, and it's better to just start off with it or just awaken to do a hit or two and then walk away. In a tough matchup, what I like to do most of the time is take a few points into my W early and then start maxing my R or Q. As AP Udyr, you can still max your R and not put that many points into your W early, but if you play AD Udyr, you kinda need to put points into your W early if you're getting harassed. If the lane is going smoothly and pretty easy, you can just start maxing your Q as AD Udyr. And then after Q, what I like to do is max my E if it's possible. The way I usually max my spells is either Q or R first and then my E and then W last. The mobility that E gives you is really good. The tankiness of W is not bad, but you will definitely feel the loss of speed in the mid game when you don't have your E maxed. When you hit level 6, if you have the triple tonic and you get that elixir of force, you might be able to get a kill on an unsuspecting enemy. But you have to watch out for the fact that most champions that you're going to fight up in the top top lane have an actual 1v1 dueling ultimate. So characters like Fiora, Riven, Darius, those kinds of champions get an actual dueling ultimate and they might be able to kill you with it. If you play Grasp of the Undying Udyr, you might want to just play it very slowly and just walk up to proc that Grasp and then walk away. You can also activate your W to proc up your Shield Bash and then walk away. If you play AP Bruiser Udyr with Conqueror, you actually want to stick in the thick of the fight for the most part. You can sit next to the enemy and just start burning them and then awaken your R to continue chasing and beating them down, or you just awaken your W and do a short trade that way. If you play Press the Attack, you can go for larger engages, and if you play Phase Rush, you just want the short trade. Phase Rush is especially good for full AP Udyr. You can see on screen right now a rune setup that I run on full AP Udyr. I will sometimes change Cash back to Approach Velocity or Axiom Arcanist to Mana Flow Band, but other than that everything else stays. Maybe I do something to the small runes as well, where I take a bit of movement speed or the tenacity and slow resist. What you want to do as full AP Udyr in the laning phase is just awaken your R and then walk away, and eventually that will kill the enemy. If you play AD Udyr, what you're looking to do is to try to clear out the wave so you can get an isolated Q and duel the enemy. If you have a few points in your Q, you can actually burst them down pretty hard. If they don't expect it, they straight up die. AD Udyr is not actually that weak in the early game. It's just that AP Udyr is stronger in the first few levels, which is why you end up with Doran's Ring as your starting item and you take a few points into your R, or at least 1 point into your R. As AD Udyr, your first legendary item will be probably a Ravenous Hydra or a Stride Breaker. If you take Ravenous Hydra, you will have infinite lane sustain basically. The moment you get that Ravenous, you can walk in the middle of the wave, activate Ravenous Hydra and heal back to full health after every single trade. Stride Breaker is really good into matchups where you need to stick to the target. The actual active slows down the opponent and it gives you some movement speed. In matchups such as Vayne or Cassiopeia, Gnar, those kinds of matchups, it's better to take Stride Breaker because it will allow you to actually stick to the enemy. Now there's some ranged matchups that are very annoying to deal with as AD Udyr, such as Kennen or Aurora. If you happen to fight one of these matchups, you basically always want to max your W or almost max your W, and you want to take this rune setup that you see on screen right now. You need as much sustain as you can get, and you might not even rush Stridebreaker or Ravenous Hydra and you might go for Spirit Visage, or you go for Tiamat so you have some wave clear and then go into Spirit Visage. If you are playing AP Bruiser Udyr, you're looking for Liandry first or Riftmaker or even Bloodletter's Curse, but there's cases where you can take something like a Spirit Visage as well. Maybe you go for Unending Despair or Thornmail. AP Udyr usually has a better time taking tank items. If you are playing full AP Udyr, what you're looking for is an early lost chapter ideally. And this is because you will spam that R a lot. You need to awaken that R on the enemy constantly and make sure you burn them under their own tower. And because you go full AP Udyr, you will have a lot of damage. The moment you get your Sorcerer Shoes with Malignance, you will start to shred them down really hard. Just 2 or 3 awakened Rs that hit them fully will straight up kill them. But if they manage to close the gap and get on top of you, they might win the trade, so you have to watch out. You aren't tanky at all as full AP Udyr. You have a larger W shield, but your tankiness is still going to be rather low. Now when it comes to the mid game, as AD Udyr, what you want to do for the most part is just side lane and not really team fight. And this is because AD Udyr is actually pretty weak in team fights. Unless you go for a team fight focused build where you take a Sterak's Gauge and a Death's Dance, maybe you get a Spirit Visage, those kind of items that make you more of a bruiser, you are going to get insta-killed the moment you join a fight. Because most of the time you have your Ravenous Hydra as the first item, then you go for Hullbreaker, and then Lord Dominic's Regards. And with this 3 core, you will be able to 1v1 most people on the side lane. But when you go in team fights, you will get exploded the moment you get hit by one crowd control. Technically speaking, if you have just Death's Dance, it might be enough for you to survive and actually kill people, but I still wouldn't recommend it. If you don't have Mercury Treads and a single crowd control hits you, you're probably dead or useless. If you have to awaken your E to ignore crowd control to get on top of someone, it's really bad for AD Udyr. And this is because you need your awakened Q to kill people. Without it, it's gonna be really bad for you. So instead what you want to do is split push all the time. Push on the other side of the main objective, make them come to you while your team does an objective. That way your team can take a fight where they are 4 people and the enemy has only 3 people on their side. And you have some incredible push power when you get that hole breaker. AP Bruiser Udyr is quite different here in the sense that you actually want to team fight more than side lane. You can still side lane, but team fighting is much better for AP Bruiser Udyr. And this is mostly due to the fact that you're going to go for tankier items and you have your Phoenix maxed. With Phoenix maxed, you can actually put that zone on the opponents and slow them down and deal a lot of damage, which is obviously better in a team fighting scenario because AD Udyr just has that single target burst. You can also awaken your E and it's not that bad for AP Udyr because you are tankier by default. Most of the time you will go for items like Spirit Visage, Unending Despair, Thornmail, maybe Ronduin if they have a lot of crit champions. So if the enemy forces you to awaken your E to get on top of someone, you might be able to come out on top still. It's just that you need to make sure that your team is nearby because without your awakened R or awakened Q when you isolated, you're not gonna deal as much damage. Try to be around objectives more or try to just force team fights when you get the opportunity, because you can just run in there, awaken that Phoenix and disrupt people. Now as for full AP Udyr, what you want to do is awaken your Phoenix and then walk away and wait for your awaken cooldown to be up again and then return and do it again. This will be how you play in the mid game and in the late game as full AP Udyr. You can technically also sit on side lane as full AP Udyr because you have a lot of damage and you do only like 2 Phoenixes and the enemy is dead. So because of that you can push them off of the tower very easily. Normally in the mid game as AP Bruiser Udyr you need to do something like 6 Phoenix stances that are awakened to make sure that that enemy dies. But if you play full AP and you have Blackfire Torch, Malignance and Rabadon's Deathcap, they will explode. Though I still recommend going for team fights in the mid to late game as full AP Udyr, and this is because you have such a ridiculous amount of damage. If you're fighting in a choke point in the jungle, they will literally have to go around it or they die, I'm not kidding. And then after you get your death cap as the 3rd item, you can go for something like a Zhonya's as your 4th item, or maybe a Void Staff if you want more pen. If you take Zhonya's as your 4th item, then you have that stasis, so you can flash in, awaken Phoenix, then stasis. And that way you won't even die. But you have to remember that if your awaken is on cooldown, you're basically useless, because the moment you go in, you get one shot no matter what. Now, as for what you do in the late game as AP Bruiser Udyr, it's kind of the same as what you do in the mid game, I'd say. You walk in, try to tank up for your team, see which spell you need to awaken, and then see how the team fight goes. Maybe you need to awaken W to tank through a lot of burst. Maybe you need to awaken E to start a fight that way. Maybe you can just awaken your Phoenix and burn people if you have a Liandry. Though I will say, depending on what you buy, you can fill out different niches in a team fight. You can be more of a frontline champion with something like Unending Despair, Spirit Visage, and Winter's Approach. You can have a build where you just have a bunch of debuffs and you apply those to the enemy. So when you get to the later stages of the game, look at what you have in your inventory and determine how you need to play out fights. And as for AD Udyr, you wanna perma side lane. Udyr in the late game is actually a very powerful champion in the 1v1. He can 1v1 almost every other character in the game if built correctly. The one character that I don't think he can 1v1 very reliably is Fiora at full build. But he can duel something like a Camille or Set, Darius even. It just depends on what you build, because you have to adapt your build to each matchup. You do not want to teamfight as AD Udyr, and if you do want to go for them, take Death Stance and maybe even a QSS. The moment a single crowd control hits you and you're forced to awaken W or E, you're useless. AD Udyr has to awaken his Q to one-shot someone in a team fight. So because of that, I recommend sitting on side lane and perma split pushing. Split push on the other side of the main objective so you draw more people towards you, so then your team can take the objective. You can straight up dive a bunch of characters under their tower, but again you have to make sure that you have the proper build. For example, into Teemo, taking a QSS allows you to burst them really hard under tower when you're full build or close to full build, and this is because you can QSS his blind and then murder him with your awakened Q. Into a healing character like Trundle, purchasing a Mortal Reminder is very good because of the armor pen and heal cut. Into most tanks, getting a Lord Dominic's Regards allows you to one-shot them straight up. Knowing exactly what to build on AD Udyr for the 1v1 is extremely important. And when you do split push, always look at the minimap and make sure you never get caught off guard. yard. If the enemy collapses onto you and your team gets nothing, it's bad. But if, let's say, 3 people come to the bottom side of the map and you die but your team gets the Baron, that's always worth it. The exception is if you have an exceptionally large bounty. There's more builds and playstyles that I could cover in this video on Udyr, but it would take an exceptionally long amount of time. And this is because of just how flexible Udyr is. For example, there are some cases where I do teamfight because I go for a build where I have health and I just have more sustained damage in a fight. If I don't have Ravenous Hydra and I have a Stride Breaker and then maybe an Experimental Hexblade, I will probably teamfight. And if I have some other defensive items like a Ronduin, Spirit Visage, Sterax, those kind of items, it's not as bad to teamfight. But I don't do that one as often. There's cases where I do it, but not super often. And even when I do run that build, I will still try to prioritize split pushing over teamfighting. So instead, I explained and showcased the 3 main builds that I go for on Udyr. AD Bruiser Udyr, where I mostly split push, AP Bruiser Udyr, and then full AP Udyr. But again, you can experiment with a lot of different stuff. If you find another playstyle that you like, then go for it. Udyr can be played in so many ways, so don't limit yourself to just one, unless you find a playstyle that you really like. And with this, we have reached the end of the video. Before closing out the video, I just want to say thank you for sticking around to see the whole thing. I appreciate it and I hope you found the information in this video useful. I tried to give out a ton of information and explain a bunch of stuff, and hopefully this video helps you out in your Udyr journey. If you have any questions, you can just comment here and I will look to reply to them. You can also join the Discord server if you want. The link to that is in the video description alongside the mobafire guide link. And you can also catch me streaming at twitch.tv/federals123 if you want to ask me questions while I play live. It doesn't even have to be something that's Udyr related. You can ask about anything League related if you wish, and I will try to give the best answer that I can. Now, with all of this being said, thank you all for joining me in this video. I hope you found the information useful, and I will see you in the next video, hopefully very soon.
Retreat is not failure. We heal and we try again.